A lot of quarterback talk on today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Daniel Jones and Lamar Jackson news, how that impacts Jalen Hurts' contract extension, also offseason options for backup quarterback. All that and more on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Wednesday, or I should say Tuesday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase alongside Gino Camilleri. You can find our podcast Monday through Friday. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, even throughout the offseason, because, Gino, the offseason lately has been as crazy as the regular season, and that news continued today at the most important position at quarterback, and a lot of it impacted the Eagles. Number one was that the New York Giants signed Daniel Jones to a $40 million a year contract extension. It is good to be an Eagles fan, considering Daniel Jones hasn't thrown for 20-plus touchdowns in a single season in 5 years. They just gave him near Josh Allen money, and they're about to franchise tag a running back. So makes you appreciate the Eagles and the position they're in. I was terrified to become a Giants-like team, and they're not close.
I think you could also throw in the Derek Carr signing with the New Orleans Saints as well.
And how about the Cowboys franchise tagging a running back when they're paying another one double-digit money a year?
And you still have to give your quarterback more weapons as well. And Lou, this is the situation that we ultimately didn't want to be in. If you hit that fork in the road, you're either going to go and find a quarterback or you're going to be in quarterback purgatory. Those teams, man, New Orleans, best of luck with Derek Carr. Paying $40 million to Daniel Jones. I just don't see it. I never saw it. I still haven't seen it with Daniel Jones. It makes me appreciate that the Eagles have a quarterback and that they still are in a window where this whole Lamar Jackson saga might play out to their advantage, because if they could get that deal done before Lamar, you might get a deal out of it, because you don't know what Lamar is going to go for. If a team was to offer 2 first-round picks, which that exclusive tender tag does require, so you'd have to give up 2 firsts and have to sign him to a long contract. Lou, there was a team in that draft when Lamar was picked who gave up 2 first-round picks, and they went up and got Marcus Davenport, the New Orleans Saints. Imagine if they just took Lamar Jackson 4 years ago. And
I just love looking at other teams mishandling this position. The Ravens had a guy, and they are totally messing it up. The Giants think they have a guy when they clearly don't, and the New Orleans Saints continue to be the Saints. Gino, for 2 years, I was pretty miserable because I felt like the Eagles were one of these teams and I felt stuck. But now they have a quarterback that's worth paying $40+ million. And if Jones is getting 40, I think you're going to see the news is going to drop soon. The reason you haven't heard anything else about what Howie Roseman's going to do with free agents is because this Jalen Hurts contract, I think, has to come first. And it's going to be probably north of, I would say, $50 million if Jones is getting 40.
You have to look at what Howie Roseman said, and he kind of put it pretty well that, we have all these free agents performing at the top level. We didn't want to create a rift in the locker room. No, the big boulder in the way is the Jalen Hurts contract. You quite literally cannot do anything.
I was going to say, Howie loves the midseason contract,
I think it was him trying to keep his cards close to his chest, that they're trying to get this Jalen Hurts deal done. It's inevitable, Lou. It's one of those things that we know is coming, and sooner rather than later is the only option with Jalen Hurts. And if you look at it right now, Lou, you have 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, potentially 3 picks in the first 2 rounds next year, and potentially 4 comp picks after that. This team is going to be built around Jalen Hurts taking 25% of that salary cap, but you hope you could get that number down just a little bit. So let's get it in there before all these other quarterbacks start to get their deal. Yeah. Lamar Jackson is that big one, Lou. This is a Formula One race with the 2 head teams. You want to get a photo finish, even if it's that close, to get that contract in before Lamar gets it.
That's why I don't even know. I mean, we could see the news drop while we're recording, Gino, considering the Lamar Jackson news. Burrow needs a new deal. Justin Herbert. And of course, I hope it's a little team friendly. And if anybody's going to do that, it would be Hurts. And, it does make it tough to see a lot of these guys go on other positions that are going to cash in. But unlike the Baltimore Ravens, I think the Philadelphia Eagles, Howie Roseman said it himself in the press conference at the Combine, that paying a quarterback is a good thing. Somebody asked him a question and he's like, do you want me to be sentimental about the days when we didn't have to pay a quarterback? And he mentioned how it's a good thing you want to be able to pay a quarterback this kind of money, because that means you have an elite player. If you don't pay this guy, that means you're looking for that guy. So the Baltimore Ravens seem like it's the end of the world that they have to give an elite quarterback money. But the Philadelphia Eagles, I think, see it as a positive, and so do I. I mean, this is a great thing. This is how you become consistent in the NFL. And, the New York Giants and the New Orleans Saints and the Baltimore Ravens, they, I guess, are just seeing it in a different way. I don't know. Some teams, they're settling, and some don't know what they have.
What about Seattle with Geno Smith, Lou? He's getting upwards of $30 million a year. I want to pay my guy elite money, or I don't want to pay him at all.
Thank you. And I know it's easier said than done because it's harder to tank in the NFL, Gino, but there's ways to do it. I agree. You do not pay good. You pay great, or you keep looking for great. And so this offseason showed us there is that middle tier quarterback contract, but the middle tier contract is still, I mean, look at what Geno and Jones got. That's not worth it. I mean, sign a Mariota or a Gardner Minshew in free agency and try to get Caleb Williams next year. I would never want to be that team, a Minnesota, a Dallas. Look at how many years they've wasted where, sure, are they competing for the playoffs every year? Yeah, but they're not competing for championships.
And you have to be in that realm. And teams that, or fans of teams that are usually close to the salary cap, when this time of year comes around, people start to panic. But in reality, if you're not close to the cap, my belief has always been you're doing your job wrong, because you're not accumulating good enough players to even want to pay them that type of money to get up against the cap. This is a great issue to have. And there is no bigger issue in the National Football League than signing your quarterback to elite level money. Lou, if I had to put it right now, I think that $50 million number that we said just a couple of weeks ago is right about where you're going to get him. If Daniel Jones comes in at 40, I could see Jalen Hurts getting the next biggest deal out there next to Patrick Mahomes before Lamar comes in. Heck, Lou, even before Rodgers potentially gets traded to the Jets, maybe they want to rework that contract with some guarantees if he goes for 2 or 3 years before he retires. You never know with quarterbacks, so you always want to be the proactive one in this case, or you're going to be reactive, ending up paying Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, or signing Derek Carr.
Right. And Seattle's lucky, at least compared to the other teams, where they have a top pick in this year's draft because of the trade with Denver, where they can kind of have their cake and eat it too, have the mid-tier quarterback, but also draft a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson to sit behind Geno. But these other teams don't have that ability. And so I know it's a tough place to be, but they're doubling down, like not the Cardinals, although they're kind of in the same boat. The Giants and the Saints are kind of doubling down where they're in that purgatory, but they're bringing in quarterbacks that are going to keep them in that purgatory.
Without a doubt. And that's why you can't pay just good, because you're not going to invest. Let's say you're looking at stocks. Like, you're not going to look at one and say, yeah, I kind of believe in this one.
Right.
Like, yeah, I'll put $40 million in it. No, you're going to put $40 million into Apple. You're going to put it into Amazon. You're going to put it into something that something that is the elite of the elite, that gets recognized as the elite of the elite, even if it's the very good of the very good, Lou. I don't even put Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, Geno Smith in the very good. Like, that's a quarterback you win because of. That's not guys you win. No, those are quarterbacks you win with. Those aren't guys you win because of at all, in my opinion. And they're getting that money because of that.
Yeah, somebody, and I wish I could credit who it was, but somebody said, don't ever let a girlfriend stop you from trying to find a wife. And
bingo.
That's kind of what this is for these teams. And for the Eagles, that's not the case. They're going to pay Jalen Hurts. Expect that deal to come soon. I know we heard the rumors today that from Howard Eskin, take that with a grain of salt, but it sounds like maybe the Eagles are working on something with Brandon Graham. But before you hear anything about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, about Javon Hargrave, Marcus Epps, James Bradbury, Kazir White, anybody, expect that big quarterback contract to be talked about first on this podcast. I think that's what's going to drop. Gino, we're going to continue to talk about quarterback, though. Coming up next, we have our offseason options series where we roll through free agent, trade, and draft options at each position for the Eagles to add this year. The Eagles do need a backup behind Hurts. They know the importance of that position. We'll get into what those options are next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. And guys, today's show is sponsored by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here. The playoff push is on. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockdown. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and now the Locked On Podcast Network. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Gino, we're starting up our offseason options series with free agency next week. A lot of moves coming, including that big Jalen Hurts deal. But outside of Jalen Hurts' contract, the Eagles still have more work to be done at this position, Gino, because Gardner Minshew is a free agent on the roster. But outside of that, they really don't have a long-term option for Jalen Hurts' backup. And we know how important that position is in Philadelphia and across the entire NFL. And this franchise invests more in that spot than any team.
Literally any team. I mean, there's a reason you have the Super Bowl
it's not
trophy.
close.
It's because of Nick Foles, and that's because
Right.
they understand that when you are stacking positions on an NFL depth chart in terms of importance, I would say backup quarterback might be a top 15 need in the National Football League at any given time, because look at how many quarterbacks play 17 games, play 18, 19, 20 games in this schedule where you are playing nearly 5 months of intense football. There's going to be one or two spots. And we saw with the Eagles last year that this guy is going to have to step up. And not just last year, Lou, it's been nearly the last 20 years. I think all outside of one season, they have had to go to a backup quarterback. So of course it's important, because this guy might be the deciding factor in 1/17 of your outcomes of the season, if not more.
I think the only time they've not needed a backup in recent memory is 2016 when Wentz was a rookie. He played 16 games in 2019, but Josh McCown had to come in for the playoffs. So this position, as you mentioned, we know in Philadelphia how crucial it is, and the Eagles will draft them high even if they have franchise quarterbacks, i.e. Jalen Hurts, Kevin Cobb. They will pay these guys, i.e. Jeff Garcia and Nick Foles and Chase Daniel. The list goes on, and they'll keep Bradford, Daniel, and Carson Wentz on a roster until they can move some of those players. So they prioritize it a lot. And Gino, this is a good offseason to need a backup, even if Gardner Minshew leaves, which I think he will. I think he's so destined to be the Cardinal starter for Jonathan Gannon until Kyler Murray comes back. Even if he does leave, I think there are a lot of good options here. Is there anybody that you prefer from the draft or free agency?
I think the Jacoby Brissett option might be the best.
A lot of people like that one. I agree.
One, because I think it helps Jalen continue to develop. Jacoby Brissett has been in this role, this kind of master and Padawan type role, but Jalen isn't a Padawan. Let's get that right, folks. It would just be another set of eyes, an experienced veteran set of eyes to bring into that building until potentially you draft a Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Maybe you get a Malik Cunningham as an undrafted free agent. I would say the approach to this offseason, Lou, is to get a quarterback behind Jalen Hurts that isn't going to make you change too much of the game plan. As much as Gardner Minshew was good and he came in there in 2021, won that game against the Jets, you saw after that game against the Cowboys what his ceiling really was. When you take away that athletic ability and try and make that offense just a pure passing offense, that eliminates nearly 50% of what that team could do. So I think it was one of the guys over at the Draft Network, I can't remember exactly who it was, but he said there's a misnomer on guys coming out of the draft that the more pocket presence type quarterbacks are, quote, pro ready, when in fact it's the more athletic ones. Those are the guys that are going to keep you in a game, the guys that can at least make something happen when the throwing game doesn't work. Bring me a DTR, bring me a Malik Cunningham, somebody along that gambit to where Jacoby Brissett can teach them while Jalen Hurts continues just to lead the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. In Mock Draft Monday yesterday, we took Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA in the 7th round, a mobile quarterback. And if you bring in a Jacoby Brissett, that could be your trio. Malik Cunningham makes a lot of sense too at Louisville, one of the most mobile quarterbacks in this class. There's other options in that way as well. You mentioned Brissett. I've mentioned on the show a few times that I really like the idea of Marcus Mariota, and it's not just because of the 2015 tie,
prophecy, baby.
Yeah, the prophecy would be awesome as a fan to see him in midnight green finally. It'd be a funny joke, but at the same time, with Atlanta last year, was he a great passer? No, not at all. But Atlanta was in a lot of games early on, and Mariota showed that he could still be a top-level mobile quarterback. He could be a poor man's 2021 Jalen Hurts, if you will, if that makes sense. And, fair. I think he was good in some late games for the Falcons. So is he a starter at this level anymore? Not at all, but I think he can still be a top-tier backup. There are a lot of mobile options. So you got Mariota, you've got Brissett, you've got Cunningham and Thompson Robinson in the draft. And then there's some other guys too, Gino, like Tyler Huntley's a free agent, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield. I mean, those guys will probably want to try to compete for a starting job, but not all of them are going to be starters, especially with, Rodgers out there and all these rookies too. I mean, most of these guys are going to have to be backups.
Yeah, you take a look. I mean, there's names like Teddy Bridgewater still out there.
Yeah, didn't even mention Teddy. Yeah.
Mason Rudolph is your cup of tea. I think
Dalton's out there too.
Yeah, Case Keenum. I think this market, even though all of those guys don't really fit what the Eagles need exactly, that market isn't going to cost you Chase Daniel type money where you're paying a backup quarterback $10 million a year. Frankly, you don't have that. Are you going to invest $60 million total in the quarterback position moving forward? No, I don't think so. But if you could get one of those guys for $5-6 million, Lou, that's what they like to pay those backups. Right in that's prime backup money in the NFL. You're getting anywhere from 5 to 7. If you're behind a rookie, you're probably getting somewhere to $10 to $12 million at this point, if not more. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater made a living out of making nearly $20 million to be the guy before a rookie. So go out there and take any approach necessary. Just don't let it be a Clayton Thorson type pick where you're just picking a quarterback just to pick one. If you're going to use a draft pick, use it on somebody that you completely believe that you can develop to be that guy. Because just having an arm, Ian Book, isn't good enough to be a quarterback in the National Football League. You have to be able to read, you have to be able to process, and you have to be an athlete. And that's why I love DTR. Chip Kelly asked him to do a lot of those things where he's reading multiple half-field reads. That's okay. That's what you're going to get out of a backup. You're not going to go through 6-7 progressions. You just need somebody that has been in a system similar to the Eagles where they like to air it out. That's why I love the idea of a Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I don't think he's going to cost you what a Jake Hayner might cost you.
Yeah, because I would love Hayner. Top level.
I
was going to mention him, but
I would love Jake Hayner, brother.
At this point, you look at those first 4 quarterbacks that are going to go off the board in the top 10. After that, I would say Jake Hayner is probably QB5. He'll probably end up being a second or third round pick.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean,
so he'll be too rich for the Eagles' blood, I think.
Once you get past those top 4, it's open game for whoever is going to take Jake Hayner. And that almost feels like a Mason Rudolph pick where it's like an aging team that needs somebody that could potentially come in and quote unquote is pro ready enough. That's Jake Hayner territory. But Lou, they're going to have an opportunity to upgrade that position, to get younger, to get more youthful, and also at the same time, potentially bring in a veteran that can also help Jalen develop. Because remember, Jalen's only been a full-time starter in the National Football League for nearly 2 years, just about 2 years and a quarter of a season. So he still is developing in his own right. As well as he played, the development is still there, which makes it crazy to believe that his ceiling is even higher. And I could see him getting that much better as a quarterback. And at the end of the day, Lou, if they walk out with 67% of their quarterback room different from last year, will I bat an eye? No. Will I be shocked? No. Will I believe it's an upgrade? Absolutely. That's the only way that they're going to get better in that room, is to continue to try and upgrade in the margins, because that's one of the positions too that people forget about. If you just sit on your hands, you're going to be left with some of these teams that have backup quarterbacks, the Curtis Painters of the world. Let's go back to Peyton Manning. When Curtis Painter had to go in
that's the thing. The Eagles have never had
14.
that. And that's the good thing, is the Eagles have never really been in a situation where their starter goes down and you're like, they have no chance. Even Josh McCown, who, I mean, at that point, it was pretty much over for him. The Eagles still had a chance in that 2019 wild card game.
So tear his hammy. He might win the whole darn thing.
And they were down 8 driving down the field in the fourth quarter. So they haven't really had to deal with that. Gardner Minshew too. I mean, maybe he's back and they just run it back with who they have and he can't find a starting, or at least somewhere to compete for a starting job. But Gino, I actually feel like they can upgrade from Minshew this year. So I actually hope that they go in a different direction. But regardless, I mean, we just named about a dozen plus guys that are out there. There are a lot of options for the Eagles at QB2. So definitely a great spot to be in. I want to talk about Lamar Jackson coming up next because I do feel like it impacts Jalen Hurts in a way and the NFC outlook in 2023. So we'll get into that to wrap up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Offseason options, quarterback edition, talking Jalen Hurts' contract extension. Same with Daniel Jones, how that helps the Eagles. Backup quarterback
update on
option.
Daniel Jones.
Ooh, let's get it.
As we're speaking, he can earn up to $195 million in his contract over 4 seasons. So that's nearly $50 million for Daniel Jones, Lou. If you're going to pay $50 million to Jalen Hurts or Daniel Jones, it's 100 times out of 100 Jalen Hurts.
And look, I've seen what Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts did outside of year 2, but Gino, most quarterbacks do not take 5+ years to take that step. I mean, if Daniel Jones was going to do it, I think he was going to do it. And the guy has never thrown for more touchdowns in games played. He's never had 20+ touchdowns in a year. So the Giants pay Jones today, and they tag Saquon Barkley. The Saints yesterday bring in Derek Carr. A lot of weird decisions at this position. And Gino, that continues with the Baltimore Ravens, who apparently don't, these other teams think they have more than they really do. And the Baltimore Ravens, I feel like, think they have less than they actually do with Lamar Jackson, placing that non-exclusive tag on him, which means, of course, they can match any offer from another team. But now Lamar can go negotiate with other teams, and they would just have to give up 2 first-round picks to sign him. I feel like, Gino, this is going to be an NFC team. Miami doesn't have a first this year, so they can't really negotiate. We heard today the Jets want Rodgers. They're all in on that. I feel like it's the NFC, the quarterbacks outside of Jalen Hurts, it is not very good. If I'm most teams in that conference outside of Philly and maybe Chicago and now New York, I would scrap whatever my plan A was and try to get Jackson here. I hope it doesn't happen, but I feel like he's coming into this conference.
I think there's maybe 7 teams, maybe, that shouldn't take a look at Lamar Jackson. I mean, you could go down the list. I think Philadelphia, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. I mean, Patrick Mahomes.
It's already getting there, man.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost even Miami. Even if I'm Miami, Lou, if I'm Miami, I get Lamar Jackson all day. Over
the issue is he'd have to wait until after this draft to negotiate with Miami because they don't have that one this year.
That would be unfortunate. But
if I'm like Gino, if I'm San Francisco, scrap Lance and Purdy. Go for the championship that you've been knocking on the door and get Lamar Jackson. If I'm the Detroit Lions and I'm ready to go, scrap Jared Goff for that top pick, go for Lamar Jackson. You're only giving up a late first and a mid first this year. So I feel like, I don't know why Baltimore is doing this the way they are. They think basically that he's not going to find that guaranteed money. So they're saying, go out there and try to find it. And if you get a different deal, we'll match it. But the logic there is, Lamar is, number one, not going to take that deal because he's going to get more. And even if he did, he's not going to come back to Baltimore if they match that kind of deal. I mean, they have totally botched the situation.
Without a doubt. And this is one of those things where in the NHL, they have the offer sheet, right? But it doesn't take your team to say, oh, we don't really want him, but if anybody else wants him, make your best deal. It's, oh, you just make an offer
and
sheet.
Then maybe and then if based on what they're offer, maybe we'll have you back. Lamar Jackson's not coming back to that situation.
No, not at all. Not at all. If it worked like the NHL, maybe that somebody could say, here's 2 first-round picks. Let us talk to him. But no, Baltimore is putting him on the curb, putting a make a best
you're not worth
sign.
it. You're not worth what you think you're worth, and we want other teams to tell you that, and then be like, see, should come back. He's not going to want to be back with that team.
He's never going to do that.
And again,
Jones,
Gino, he's not going to get
$1 million guaranteed. Just an update.
There we go. And Lamar is not going to, again, I don't think he's going to sign for less than what Baltimore is willing to match, because I think there's going to be a lot of competition in the NFL for him. I think there's going to be a lot of teams willing to give up 45 plus a year, fully guaranteed, and 2 first-round picks. I think he's worth it. So I guess Baltimore doesn't think he is. I think they're nuts.
I think your pick of him going to Detroit is as spot on as you could. I mean, Jared Goff is one of those quarterbacks that it's like, could we upgrade with this team that we have? We're young. They're not going to have to pay a lot of their playmakers for another couple of years. They have a very young defense as well. You have those picks from the Matthew Stafford trade. Lou, that's a pretty good one. You want to get him out of the conference?
If I'm Carolina too, I would do it if I'm the Panthers. Instead of, the 9th overall pick, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson trading up to go get a guy.
What about Tampa?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not? I mean, you're going to have to cut a couple of those guys.
The Giants should have did this, man. I mean,
they
should have said, never mind, we're going to give this money to Lamar and trade 2 first-round picks instead of paying Daniel Jones. Why would Washington not be all over this? It doesn't sound like they are, but to me, outside of, like you mentioned, 6 or 7 teams, if I'm the NFL, anybody else, I'm all in on this.
You have to be, and especially those teams that one you already have a back half of the first round type of pick this year, and 2, if you're adding Lamar Jackson, you are projecting out that you are most likely competing for a high level playoff push next year, that first round pick will essentially be valued at a second round pick. How many times are you going to get that opportunity to get a known commodity like Lamar Jackson? And nobody wants it. This is just like leaving the keys in a Ferrari and all you have to do is sign off on the title and it's yours now. That's essentially what you're doing with Lamar Jackson. And why a team like the Baltimore Ravens, who since their general manager left, has been one of those teams that is fake smart in the NFL. They haven't been doing very smart things. You're going to go and pay and trade and pay Roquan Smith that type of money, but not pay your quarterback, because linebackers make that much of a difference in the NFL compared to the quarterback position.
I know.
I don't know.
And I get the Ozzie Newsome reputation was incredible, and that's where Baltimore has this prestigious rep from, but they're kind of like the Eagles after 2017. Everybody thought they were ahead of the game, and really they weren't, and that's kind of the Ravens, and it could hurt the Eagles because right now you look at the quarterbacks Jalen Hurts has to deal with. It's the only guy I think could really be a stud for the long term is maybe Justin Fields and or Trey Lance. Lamar coming in would instantly make him the second best quarterback, or first, depending on how you feel, Hurts versus Lamar. So I hope that he does stay in the AFC, but I think the NFC is where he's going to end up. So again, I think the theme of today's show is just appreciate where the Eagles are at in this position and how much it's changed, because a year ago, they were kind of in the boat of these other teams.
Without a doubt. And hats off to Howie Roseman for taking that chance. And we gave him a lot of flack for that pick, but I think that was a great thing to learn, that in the NFL, you can't sit on your hands if you think you are just good. If you have a chance, and after the Eagles Twitter account and their website put out that interview of Jalen Hurts from the combine over the weekend, I was never more confident in that kid after seeing that, and I see why they drafted him.
Because he's a video was from 2022, man. I mean, he used that poise to. It's impressive.
It's unbelievable.
The Eagles got their guy, so it's a great feeling. Now it's time to continue to build around him. Once he gets his contract, we're gonna get through those options. Our offseason options series continues throughout this week. Subscribe to Locked On Eagles for a show Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Tomorrow, we're going to dive into the running back position and wide receiver skill positions. We've got the line, defense, all that talk and more. We thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure also your second listen is the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. They provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into sleepers and hidden gems that can change your team. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get Locked On Eagles. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. We'll see you tomorrow. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go, Birds.
Eagles fly.